Okay, hello and welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Katie, and we are with Sally Fallon from the WESTON A Prize Foundation, which is a great honor, Sally. I'm so looking forward to
Thank you.
today. Sally is a legend in the world of real food. She is the founder of the WESTON A Prize Foundation, and the WESTON A Prize Foundation it was founded to promote the work of Dr. Weston A. Price, who is a really epic man, and there's actually a YouTube video in Spanish about the work of Dr. Price. And the Weston A. Price Foundation today is a foundation that promotes health and promotes a return to traditional diets and to nutrient-dense food. So, Sally, I'm so looking forward to talking with you. Today, we're going to focus on the proper preparation of grains and legumes, because this is a really important topic, especially because in all parts of the world, especially in Latin America, where the majority of my audience is, people are eating lots of grains and legumes. So, we need to talk about how to prepare them so that our bodies can receive their nutrients, because we're not what we eat, we are what we digest. And so, so that's the introduction, and I'll let you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Well, thank you, Katie. We love the work you're doing in South America, and one thing we really want to do in the next couple of years is get a larger Hispanic audience, Spanish-speaking audience, because you are suffering from the same health problems that everybody else in the world is. So, and those are the health problems that come with modernization and abandoning the traditional food ways and starting to eat modern processed food. And one of the big health problems that we're seeing today is problems with grains. Celiac disease, irritable bowel syndrome, outright grain allergies or intolerances. And why would this be? Well, one view is, well, this is a new food for humans, and humans aren't supposed to eat grain. That's the Paleo Diet view, but it's just based on a false premise that our ancestors and the Paleolithic people didn't eat grains, and now we know that they absolutely did. Anywhere in the temperate regions, from Australia to South America, North America, Asia, Europe, Africa, they all ate grains. Excuse me. However, they didn't eat grains the way we do today. Today we make granola, we make a whole grain muffin or bread. We just boil our oats, and so that is not the proper preparation of grains. It's because grains are extremely hard to digest. They are the food in our diet that is the most difficult to digest. So why? Well, grains have built-in protection mechanisms. They're deliberately hard to digest. They have a kind of coating around them. I call that the plastic coating. It's not plastic, of course, but it's like a coating of preservatives. And that keeps everything inside that grain fresh until it's time to sprout. And then suddenly the preservatives melt away, they get neutralized, and then the grain can sprout. Now, we don't want to eat preservatives. These preservatives for us are very problematic. They block minerals, for example, make it hard to absorb minerals. This one's called Phytic Acid. They block protein digestion. They can cause abnormal changes in the blood, things like lectins, hemagglutinins, enzyme inhibitors. So there's a whole cargo of these substances that are there for a reason, a good reason, to protect the grains, but they're not good for us. And so when we eat grains that are not properly prepared, we start to have digestive problems. It's as easy as that.
Okay, so A grain is the seed of a grass.
That's right.
And you know what's interesting is that when a lot of people talk about anti-nutrients, but I always think, gosh, it's only anti from your perspective, you know, from the plant perspective, it's
Yes.
like fabulous because like you said, it's like these preservatives that are protecting the seed because that's like the new life. So
Yes.
it makes sense that there's more anti-nutrients from the human's perspective in grains, which are seeds of the grass family, than in other parts of the plant, like maybe the leaves or the flowers or something.
Or the stem, yeah. And it's not just grains, it's all seeds. All seeds have these anti-nutrients in them. Now, in nature, there are 4 things that you need to make these anti-nutrients get neutralized or disappear. Moisture, warmth, a slight acidity, about the acidity of the soil, and time. Okay? So we just apply those same principles to preparing our grains. For example, oatmeal, we soak the oats overnight in warm water that we've added a little vinegar to. So we have moisture, warmth, slight acidity, and time, because we soak them in the warm kitchen overnight. That period of soaking gets all the little enzymes and gremlins going in there and neutralizes these many substances in grains. Then you also do need to cook the grains because you need to gelatinize the starch to moisturize the starch, and that's what the cooking does. But the cooking alone will not get rid of these anti-nutrients. You need to first, or either before or after you cook, you need to soak in an acidic medium. A lot of cultures grind the grains, cook them, and then let them ferment. A very good example is corn in South America. The corn is ground, it's cooked, and then it's wrapped up in a banana leaf or a corn husk and allowed to ferment for 2 weeks before they use it to make their tortillas or whatever, or their tamales. It's mixed, how do you pronounce?
Nixtamalize.
Okay, but that word tamal is in there. And that's the same word as tamale.
Well, okay, this is interesting because when because I spent a couple of months in Mexico this year, and so so the corn is harvested and dried, and then that dried corn is cooked with cal, with the alkaline substance, and then they get the masa, and then they make the tortillas, but usually that masa, like, it'll sit out maybe for a couple of hours, but I've never known anybody to let it sit out for 2 weeks. Although I did go to one place that says, they call it the masa azteca, where it's almost like a sourdough, where they put a little bit of the masa and then use it to make tortillas, and then they mix fresh masa, and there's a little bit of the old, so it's kind of like a
Okay, well, that's another way of doing it, but I know that in ancient times it was actually 2 weeks. The Cherokee bread that the Indians, North American Indians made was also a 2 week, and it was called pozole. Now, I know that pozole is applied to other grain preparations, but it was a 2 week fermentation. But that, whether it's 2 hours or 2 weeks, it is an acid fermentation. So first you have your alkaline preparation, and that's to liberate the B vitamins, and then you have your acid preparation, which gets rid of the anti-nutrients. Now, closer to home, we take something like oatmeal, and the oatmeal, as I said, we soak the oatmeal overnight in warm acidulated water, and that is our acid preparation. We don't need that alkaline preparation for oats.
Okay.
and then we cook it. And all grains need to be cooked as well as fermented.
Okay, so one of the questions that I have is like this addition. Okay, we usually add whey, which is a byproduct of yogurt making or cheese making or kefir, to the soaking water, like you said, to acidify that soaking water. But that's not necessarily traditional in South America. Like, I've asked a lot of people in a lot of countries, and they're saying that their grandmothers and great-grandmothers probably just used water. And is that enough? So I guess my question is, like, it's not necessarily traditional across Latin America to soak with an acidic medium. It's like more traditional just to soak with water. So is it that in modern?
I think that's true of beans.
Okay.
I don't think people, and the different kind of beans grew in places where the water was a certain pH, and some beans do better soaked in alkaline water. So beans are a little bit different than grains, and they are soaked in water for a long time, 24 hours, rinsed a couple of times, and then cooked. Okay, and then in some cases fermented, because there's something in South America called chugo. It's in El Salvador, which is the fermented bean porridge. So very often there was a fermentation after the cooking. But the beans don't necessarily need the acid added. But as far as I know, well, let's put it this way: if you take that cooked cornmeal and wrap it in a corn husk, it's going to get sour.
Yeah.
It'll get sour even if you haven't added anything. So.
Right. So would you recommend that someone always add like a probiotic acidified medium to their soaking water? Is it necessary to use like whey? Is milk kefir okay? Is water kefir okay? Some people are adding kombucha, but kombucha doesn't seem like it would be an equivalent to.
Well, it can be anything acidic. I use vinegar. Just do a couple tablespoons of vinegar.
Okay.
And my experience with grains is very interesting. If I eat oatmeal that has not been prepared properly, I cannot make it through the morning. I will have what's called toxic shock and go and get a fever and run to the bathroom, and my legs will be shaky. And that's a very visceral reaction I have to oatmeal that hasn't been prepared properly. And I've heard from many others who've had the same experience. Now, same with the bread. Of course, in North America, you have bread and wheat bread usually. And so many people are having problems with wheat. But if you make a true sourdough bread, and that's a long fermentation with the sourdough culture, and then it's baked, most people have no problems whatsoever.
Okay, so with bread, we know that it needs to be sourdough.
Yes.
And with grains, like I guess the doubt for people is like, and for myself too, is like how to know how long to soak, and like the temperature of the water and the medium, the acidic,
Yeah, you don't have to be so careful. You know, 7 hours is usually enough, but it can be longer.
Okay.
2 tablespoons of vinegar in your oatmeal, according to the recipe and Nourishing Traditions, is fine, but it could be a little bit more. It's not, you don't need to be so exact and so careful.
Okay. So,
and a warm kitchen, you know, anything over 70 degrees is fine.
Okay, so do you think that, like, okay, if we use vinegar, we're adding acidity to the soaking water, but if we add whey, we're adding something acidic and probiotic, and some bacteria, not all, but some produce phytase, which is the enzyme that breaks down phytic acid. So is it a good idea to use a probiotic medium for soaking if that's available?
Yeah, if you have it. But, you know, again, I don't like to make things too complicated. And yeah, I mean, typically I don't have any whey around, and I just use the uh, vinegar. I just don't happen to have any whey right now. So
Okay.
yeah, again, I think people get too hung up. Sometimes I get these emails with these long questions and what should the temperature be and this and that. And I think at that point I think you're making everything too complicated.
Okay. Okay, so like soak your grains in water with vinegar. If you have whey, use whey. There might be a
Yes.
little extra phytase activity. Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, a very good thing with the oats is to put a few rye flakes in there,
Okay.
because the rye flakes have a lot of phytase in them and the oats do not.
Okay. I've heard that actually. Like you can grind up. I've done where I grind up in a coffee grinder some rye grains, and then I put that in there.
With the oats, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because in South America, it's very common to eat oatmeal for breakfast.
Is that right?
Yeah, they call it
Scottish.
in Peru,
They call it what?
Quaker, which is the Spanish pronunciation of Quaker, like Quaker oat.
Oh, Quaker. Quaker.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's not necessarily like soaked. So a lot of people are buying instantaneous oats.
Yeah, and that's going to be real hard to digest. Yeah. And they have an oat cereal for babies. It's called Probiotic Oatmeal. Oats are ground up really fine. It has probiotics, and you're just supposed to add water, not even cook it.
Okay.
And I saw a lady the other day whose baby had stopped gaining weight. And I said, well, what are you feeding it? And she showed me this oatmeal. Well, the baby could not assimilate anything from that oatmeal. And the baby was always fussy because its tummy hurt. So unfortunately, they're not giving the proper instructions for these grains.
Yeah. It's like feeding a baby like instantaneous oatmeal is probably the worst idea.
The worst idea you can possibly have. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually another video that is very highly needed, like nutrition of preconception nutrition, pregnancy nutrition, and then young baby nutrition. I mean, honestly, Sally, the potential for Weston A. Price in Latin America is just infinite. It's infinite.
Really.
Yeah, because people, I mean, it's just people, this is really good information.
Okay. Well, we're working on getting Nourishing Traditions translated into Spanish.
Okay, I think it's almost ready.
Oh, I hope so, yeah.
I think so. The Diente de León, that editorial, they're wonderful. Monica and Anna is wonderful.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith in what they're going to do with the book.
Okay, so we know about grains. Now, you said beans are a little different. Beans, you think a 24-hour soak, changing the water 2 times? Is that like... Yeah,
and change the water and rinse, and then they really need to cook a long time.
Okay.
The beans should not be crunchy. They should be utterly soft.
Okay, do you cook... A lot of people put a little bit of seaweed in their beans and say
you can do that. I put garlic in.
Okay.
Yeah. And I like refried beans too. I think they're delicious. And that adds a lot of important nutrients when you fry them in the lard.
Yeah, it's so delicious. Once you eat that way, it's hard to...
Yeah, no.
Okay, so here's another question, like, when we soak the grains and then we overnight, or the beans, and we strain them, obviously we're going to cook them in new water, but do we want to rinse them? Because a lot of people's concern is that if we rinse them, we're rinsing the nutrients with the anti-nutrients.
No, you're just rinsing away the anti-nutrients.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we know that? Like,
well, I mean, they're still hard when you rinse them.
Right. Okay.
There's really nothing coming out of the beans. You're just getting rid of the water that all the anti-nutrients are in.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, actually, that makes sense because, you can't really get rid of minerals. It's like when you, like Susan Weed was talking about, like, when they cremated her mom, and she was like, well, when they gave my mom back to me, it was just minerals, because minerals,
Yeah.
like,
Well, you can get rid of minerals. I mean, if you took your cooked beans and then rinsed them, yeah, you'd be flushing away a lot of minerals.
oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
But rinsing the
Uncooked beans, yes.
okay. Is it okay? Do we have to rinse them?
Well, that's what people do.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. The one of the recipes in Nourishing Tradition, the brown rice recipe, has us cooking the brown rice in the same water that we soaked it in. Is that okay?
No, that's not. No, I don't do it that way. I strain it.
Okay.
I soak it and strain it and then cook it.
Okay. So here's a question too about rice. Like, brown rice versus white rice. A lot of people in the ancestral health community in the United States prefer white rice because they call it a safe starch. In fact, I met at one of the WESTON A Price conferences, I met a mom who had just come off the GAPS diet with her family, and she said, like, the only rice they can tolerate is white rice cooked in broth. So,
well, I can understand that. The white rice is going to be much less irritating to the digestive tract. And let's face it, many Asian cultures have eaten white rice for centuries.
right.
So I can understand that. But if that's going to be your major starch and it's white, you want to make sure that the rest of the diet is really nutrient dense. Your fish broth and your organ meats and so on, because you're not getting any nutrients really except the carbohydrates from the rice. Personally, I like brown rice better, and I think if you prepare it properly, it's going to be fine. And you'll get a lot more minerals that way.
Okay. What are your thoughts about, like, arsenic? Because they have, like, I did all this research about rice and arsenic, and they want you to cook it, like, with tons and tons of water in proportion to rice, but to get rid of, like, excess arsenic. But maybe if you're cooking it with that much water, you're also getting rid of some of the nutrients, or should we just, like, be careful about sourcing our rice?
Yes, you should get organic rice. And I'm not too concerned about arsenic coming in by mouth, because if you have good gut flora, it will take care of those toxic minerals and take them out of the body. I mean, I'm not saying you should overload your exposure to arsenic. I think you should use organic rice. But now, if you're giving rice cereal every day to your baby and it's not organic, yeah, I think that would be a problem. I think the arsenic would be a problem.
That makes sense. It seems like, so many processed foods have, like, brown rice syrup and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's probably more of a problem than just eating rice.
Possibly, yes, because it'll be more concentrated. But we shouldn't be eating processed foods for many reasons. So yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so just to back up a little bit, we talked about anti-nutrients, and people talk about phytic acid, but I want to define phytic acid, and what is the difference between phytic acid and phytate?
Well, it's the same thing. Phytic acid is actually a beautiful molecule. It has a phosphorus atom in the center, and then it has 6 arms. It looks like a snowflake.
Oh.
And each one of those arms, I think, has a hydrogen on it, which will grab minerals. And it can grab up to, because there's 6 hydrogens, it can grab up to 3 ions. Yeah, so I might be getting that confused. 3 positive charges.
Okay.
And it's like a claw. It grabs hold, and then you can't assimilate it. It takes it out of the body. But when you've soaked your grains, that releases that phosphorus and gets rid of that claw-like structure. So you get the phosphorus, and you're not blocking the other minerals.
Okay, so so it grabs hold of minerals like zinc, like,
Zinc, calcium, iron, all the plus minerals it will grab hold of.
okay. Does it grab hold of the minerals in that food or in other foods as well? Like
It both.
okay,
It'll grab hold of the minerals in the food, but also it'll grab hold of other minerals
okay.
that you might be getting from other food.
So it's, what's interesting, if you go on Google Scholar or PubMed or something and type in phytic acid, like a lot of what comes up is phytic acid is an antioxidant, and
Yeah.
so what does that mean?
Yeah, it's not an antioxidant, it's a chelator. Okay, this is a way of trying to make a profit off of a waste product.
Yeah.
In the Bible, you may remember that there is a certain period of time, I think it's about a week, when they eat unleavened bread. The children go all through the house and gather up all the culture for the bread, and they throw it out because they're going to start again after Passover. And then for that week or so, they eat the unleavened bread. So that would be very dense bread, not sourdough. And so during that week, you're going to get this detoxification effect from the phytic acid. So it might be taking out, bad minerals, whatever. And that's really kind of neat to me that they were doing this practice that helped them detoxify for a week before Passover, and then after Passover they went back to their leavened bread. The unleavened bread was just for Passover. It wasn't the rest of the year. So they were, that's why I say yes, phytic acid can have some use in the body. And the one tradition we have of that is the Hebrew tradition, where they were eating the unleavened bread for about a week. And then they went back to the leavened bread. With a new culture, by the way. They start off with a new culture. So it's very symbolic, but it's also kind of neat when you think of the health aspects.
Oh, so when you say new culture, meaning they would start a brand new sourdough?
Yes.
Part.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And possibly it was the right time of year.
Mm-hmm.
This was a moon-based calendar, so it was just after the full moon that they celebrated Passover. So that may have something to do with it also, is when they made that culture.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, I mean that it makes sense that there would be like this time to honor the new culture and start.
Yeah. Right.
You know what? Somebody was asking me yesterday about pasta, because I've actually never made homemade pasta. That's a project I need to do. But like, is pasta ever fermented? I don't think so.
Well, I think in the old days they left it outside to dry, and so that was kind of a fermentation process in the sun.
Okay.
I have to admit that I never make pasta because my husband was a farmer and it reminds him of tapeworms.
Oh.
But he will not eat pasta.
Oh, that's
but I think there are some pastas you can use. Rice pasta. I love the bean pasta, bean noodles. They're pretty neat. Yeah.
Well, I usually get like gluten-free pasta at the store, but I don't necessarily think that those were properly prepared gluten-free.
Probably not. Yeah. So I would keep your pasta consumption to a minimum.
Okay. Yeah, I don't eat that much pasta, but every once in a while I like it. Although now that you said the tapeworm thing,
I know. I same with me. He said, Sally, I just can't eat that.
Okay. Interesting. Hey, I do have one question about oats, about granola. Like, if we soak it really, really well with whey, and then dehydrate it to make granola. Is that okay?
We've been having this discussion on the chapter leader group, and so I don't know. I don't think that's enough because the grains need to be soaked and cooked. So what I did was I took some leftover soaked oatmeal. I mixed it with melted butter and a sweetener and spread it out. So it's soaked and cooked. And then I dehydrated it. And it turned out pretty well. It's a little bit sour, but and I had no problems digesting it.
Okay, was it crunchy? Because I tried to make like cooked oatmeal granola and it's just like kind of soggy. It's just not.
Well, it takes a long time to dehydrate.
Okay. Okay. Huh. I got. And
you have to keep breaking it up and turning it, but it takes a couple days to dehydrate.
Yeah, that's interesting. But honestly, traditionally, people were probably just eating like porridge, gruel.
They ate porridge. They did not eat granola.
Yeah.
And they also did interesting things with the bran. So if they were milling the oats and they had the bran left, they made what was called sowens with the bran, and it was soaked for so long that it became gelatinous. They could make desserts out of it.
Okay.
But they weren't eating rice bran, they were soaking it for a long time.
Do you think that cooking your grains and legumes and broth is a good idea?
Sure. I do think it's a good idea. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because
it gives you more minerals, makes them easier to digest.
Okay. Like through what mechanism does it make it easier to digest? Just because because broth in general is really easily digestible?
Yes, and the broth contains gelatin, which really aids in digestion.
Okay. Yeah, I honestly, the only reason I don't cook all of my grains and legumes in 100% broth is because I don't always have enough.
Exactly, and I think it would make your oatmeal taste kind of funny. But for rice and beans, yes, you can cook in broth.
Yeah, rice and beans is great. Okay, great. Well, I think those are all my questions, although let me because I don't want to miss anything.
Well, I just want to say a word about nuts because we do the nuts a little bit differently. Now, nuts are not particularly high in phytic acid, but they are very high in enzyme inhibitors, and that's what gives you that funny drying or swelling of the inside of the mouth when you eat nuts. A lot of people have that reaction to nuts. So the nuts we do differently. We soak the nuts in salt water for 6 to 8 hours, and then we dehydrate them. You don't need to cook them. We dehydrate them. And we call those crispy nuts, and I'm sure you've had crispy nuts, and they're delicious.
Yes.
And very digestible.
So you would not recommend putting vinegar or whey with the nuts?
No, I don't. I just use salt.
Okay. What does the salt do exactly?
Well, it's obviously it activates certain enzymes in the nuts to get rid of the enzyme inhibitors.
Okay. Would it be a bad thing to roast them? Not a lot of people have dehydrators.
Well, you can do it in an oven. I do it in my oven.
Oh, you do? It goes low enough?
Yeah.
Are you trying to get, like, what's the max temp that you can?
Well, I mean, ideal is 150, but mine goes to 200, so I just do it at 200.
Okay. Well,
again, I think people get too persnickety about how they're doing things.
Well,
I mean, dehydrator is best.
Yeah.
It's the quickest and gets things really dry, but as you say, a lot of people have dehydrators or have room for a dehydrator.
Although I literally about 10 minutes, well, not 10 minutes ago, like 30 minutes ago, published a video about a solar dehydrator project in Mexico. So
neat. Yeah.
You can watch that video and then make a solar dehydrator.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. Well, that is good to know. people nowadays eat so many nuts, and I think it's a little bit.
I think we're going overboard on the nuts. They're eating the nut beverages, and they're using nuts as a substitute for protein. And nuts are, like a special treat, in my opinion. First of all, they're expensive. They're very expensive. They have a lot of salicylates in them. They can be a problem if you are eating too many nuts.
Well, also, it just doesn't make sense to have a diet based on nuts, because if you, like, in real human life, if you expend more calories trying to, like, get like, you can't, that's what we talk, you'll die because you're,
Well, you have a good nut harvest, you won't be expending too many calories, but
that's true. But
they are kind of a special treat.
Yeah, like cracking them. I don't know.
So, like, for example, on our oatmeal, we put maybe a tablespoon of chopped crispy nuts on our oatmeal. And it gives a nice crunch to the soft oatmeal. It's a nice treat. But we're not eating nuts as our main meal. You see what I'm saying? Right.
Yeah. I do think there are a lot of people that are making nut milks and like nut desserts and like
nut burgers. Yeah.
Nut burgers. So it's just that's a lot of nuts. It'll make you nuts if you eat them.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that we like? Any words of wisdom that you wanna close with?
Well, I think you want to bring up your children so they can tolerate grains.
Right.
So, because to not be able to tolerate grains makes your life very difficult, really very difficult. And you're going to be weird. You're going to be different from the other children. So, first of all, you don't start off grains until they're a year old. You hold back on the grains. You're going to give your baby egg yolks and liver and meat, maybe some cooked fruit, banana, soup, and then when they're about a year, you can start on the oatmeal that's properly prepared.
Okay. Yeah, honestly, that's probably I feel like if there was some sort of course about preconception nutrition and then early pregnancy and early childhood nutrition, that would be like the most useful thing for the world ever.
Well, I do have a book, the Nourishing Traditions Book of Baby and Child Care. So
I know we just got to get that in Spanish.
Well, maybe after Nourishing Traditions.
Yeah. Well, first we have to market Nourishing Traditions so a lot of people buy it, and then we'll have the interest generated to come to do the other one.
Yeah.
I just will say I wanted to give a shout out. I'm in Washington State at a raw goat milk farm called St. John Creamery, and they are so lovely, and I look messy and tired because I am messy and tired.
I've been milking goats.
I've been milking 100 goats twice a day. It's a lot of work, but and I'm taking a break to do this, but the evening milking starts not for another 2 hours. So Sally, thank you so much for all of
Thank you for having me. It's a very important subject.
Yes, it really is. And, I wish you lots of health, and
thank you.
I'm excited for the growth of WESTON A Price in Latin America.
Okay. Yay.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.